schools, and you guys all have great ideas. We're so fortunate for the innovation, and that's what we need, because school isn't the way it was when I was a kid. You know, I can sit there and lament, but like, you know, these didn't exist. We didn't have personal computers, and the world is changing. And Wilton is not an average town, nor do the people who live here want to be average. They're not average, they expect more. And we can't keep asking everyone to produce and be innovative and keep up with educational practice, which is changing to meet the needs of our world. And I just think that we need to give kids everything, but we also just need to focus. If we have to, I hate the idea that we make those decisions, that we have to make these cuts, that we can't just do it all. But, you know, I just would like to see us, like, you know, I mean, give money to where, you know, and you guys are doing that, I'm not questioning that, but I think the community has to be aware of that. We want the kids to succeed.
Right. Okay.
I guess I'm gonna play that newbie card, because I can.
Only this year.
I look at a lot of the cuts that were made, and I just feel that those are very detrimental and really touch our children more so than some of the things like the professional development. And I come from a corporate world. I think professional development is huge and very important, and I want our teachers on top of everything and being where they are. But I feel that maybe that there are some cuts that can be made this year that can come back for next year instead, and we can bring back textbooks and library books and the social worker. I you know, trying to go through this whole budget and try and figure out where the cuts are, it's really hard. And but I do feel that, you know, what's going to really influence our children the most are going to be books and more tangible items. And so that's been one of those things that's just been nagging me since I first looked at the budget. And I certainly couldn't say what needs to be cut, but I think that there's enough that people can step back and say, well, can we do this next year instead of this year? And maybe we don't have our teachers fly to training programs. They'll stay, you know, within the New England area or drivable or just something like that. I just, you know, even if it's saving $1,000 here and $2,000 there, it's gonna all add up, especially if it's $20,000 in library books that can go to the schools, the kids that can use them. So that's just my newbie opinion.
Thank you.
As I look at, you know, this chart on question 91, I would say I have strong support for adding the social worker, the ELL teacher, and the digital subscriptions to the textbooks. Those three things, to me, seem like a no-brainer that they should absolutely be in our budget. The secretary one, I mean, I understand we're losing that secretary, and it's a hard call until we address the overall secretarial staffing and what is appropriate staffing and studying that. So that one would be a hard one for me to say, just go ahead and replace that person until we take a more in-depth look at our secretarial staff in general. The high school one, it seems to me that if we do some of the research and the math to say what is it costing us today not to have this high school, well, that might just pay for itself.
Right.
We might find that that's like, it's already paid for, that's like a no-brainer decision to add that back in. And the textbooks, I would agree with everything Laura just said. You know, we've made this commitment to bring your own device, to the one-on-one, to not then provide next year's students with a digital textbook is just insane to me. That's a step backward, so I highly support that one as well. So those are the three, the social worker, the ELL, and the textbooks are my top three. The high school, I think we could probably make a case for it, and it's just the secretary one that's still a little questionable in my mind.
Thank you. Glenn?
Well, we, over the last few years, as we presented the budgets and we've looked at them, and I commend the administration for the work they've done, particularly the last 2 years in our budgets. we've always said that we would not, under any circumstances, affect the classroom, period. And that was a vow, that was a commitment that we made. Not having textbooks directly affects the classroom, and it boggles my mind that we would even consider not being properly equipped, properly prepared, and have our students have access to what they need to learn from. I mean, it just, as I look through this, and I look through the thousands of dollars of travel, professional development, you know, whatever it is that Lori mentioned, we've got to find a way. I mean, it just strikes me that this budget, if it doesn't change, if we don't add back those items, we're cutting muscle now.
Mm-hmm.
And we're violating a vow that we made that we would not do anything, ever, that would impact and harm the classroom. And the library, 20-year-old libraries at our 2 elementary schools, it's just inexcusable. I mean, absolutely, totally inexcusable for this system, for this district, for this town. So I strongly feel that we've got to go back and add back whatever we need to get our libraries up to date and our elementary school, both of our elementary schools. The kids use them. They read. I mean, we just need to be current. We need to get them up to date. And I'm not sure that the money that we put forward to do that is even adequate. Hopefully it is. But in no way, shape, or form can we not have textbooks, be they digital or hardback. I mean, it violates every principle. I mean, that's what we're here for. That's what we're charged. That's our responsibility to provide that and be equipped and be prepared. I just even discuss not having them boggles my mind. I just don't understand it. That would be that we would even be talking about that as an option to meet a budget number not having textbooks. Is beyond my comprehension. I just don't get it.
Thank you. Debbie?
Okay. I'm taking everything and, you know, and I'm gonna be repetitive, I know. But I always argue, and you've heard me say this before, for sort of slow and steady is
Right.
a good approach. You don't wanna be so slow that you're gonna reach a point where the next year has to be 8%. I think that's crazy. So I would rather, you know, I think 1% perhaps is the target that one of the boards has put forward is unrealistic in this year, and given our history, I don't see a way of getting to that 1%, given all the information that we've heard, and given how lean this budget is. So, when I look at the budget and going to that slow and steady thing, the first thing I would look for is, are we doing any harm? And I think people have talked, and I totally agree that not having adequate textbooks, taking away a digital tool that has been there, unless you don't think it's working anymore, but doing it purely for monetary reasons is not sound thinking. So to me, that's harm. The same thing with the social worker. And that's kind of why I asked the question, do you need a social worker? If you needed a counselor instead more, then I would understand that trade-off, but I'm not sure in this day and age that reducing mental health services makes any sense. And again, all the reason I heard was monetary, not a trade-off, not they're old-fashioned, not we need something else. I didn't hear any of that. So I certainly would support adding the social worker back. And the other place for harm is the ELL. We are simply not keeping up with enrollment. And we have done it other places, we try to keep up with enrollment, and here's a program that is increasing, so if we need another teacher for that, I think we should support that. The other way of looking at the budget for me is, you know, are there any fires out there that are burning? And, the math levels of students struggling until we know more sounds very alarming. So I just think the board needs to probe more about that. I'm not sure financially that we're, or programmatically or strategically that we're ready to solve that problem. But I do think we have to address it, and it may not be this year. It's already January, and I just think that that's a timing and a research thing. I worry a little bit about the health and safety when I look at the athletic budget, and I hear that other programs have 2 athletic trainers,
Right.
and I just don't want, but on the other hand, I'm not hearing, you know, the athletic director's head isn't exploding, so I'm gonna have to trust the staff. If you really don't think it's at that safety issue, then that's certainly not for me to make that call. And I also look for a budget that keeps momentum going forward. So the fact that, and I think we need to remember this, that we have this Community Steps program, which is new, and that seems to be launched successfully and gonna continue. The preschool, I think we have, you know, sounds like anyway that we have done that appropriately, so the do it right kind of thing. I think the school climate initiatives are all positive and moving us forward. It sounds like reading intervention, while we need to perhaps tweak it and modify it here and there, basically we have our arms around it and what the kids need, and we're getting it staffed correctly. The investment in instructional improvement, I think, is tremendous. I do think we have to invest in our staff, because that's the most important tool to, in my mind, for our kids' learning. So whether it's coaching or whether it's PD, I think it's great that this district says that's a great priority for us. And then, of course, we've got the new courses at the high school, but we need to fund them. I mean, if we're gonna offer the new course, for heaven's sakes, buy the textbook. I mean, it kind of makes sense. So, and I'm glad you can find it in a grant, but, you know, the rest of them. So then you have to ask, okay, is the momentum going too quickly? Are we doing too much all at once? Is there something we should slow down? And I don't know that we have, I don't think we're going too fast, from the sounds of it in this budget and looking at it in this budget. I know from hearing the principals that, oh my gosh, there's so many needs and there's so many programs, but there's an excitement there. And I think that I'm looking forward to seeing those initiatives, but I think we just need to pace them and time them. I don't see them as fires right now. I see them as, I can't wait to see what more instructional time in science looks like at the elementary school. And then there are some that I do wish would go faster. We've already talked about the math one. I wish it would go a little bit faster, although maybe not this year, but hopefully that next year we can move on that one. And special education, trying to get those models that, because I'm sure this budget will get criticized for staffing, and in terms of the number of people, while we use every single paraprofessional, it may not be the best model. And so I was encouraged to hear Andrea's plans for, you know, figuring out how to allocate staff a little bit more clinically, and in teaching kids independence, which is what you want them to do anyway, maybe that will affect staffing levels. So I think that we need to look forward to that. So we may hear, oh, why don't you cut them this year? Well, you can't really do it without kids' IEPs falling apart. You need to, I think, dial it back slowly. And then I'd ask, okay, are there things that we're waiting too long for? And that may be the library collection. But I have to remember the trade-off there has been the library learning commons. So my guess is that while we have sort of said, well, okay, the books can wait, we're gonna start this makerspace and the ready access and all of that, we can't ignore that there has been a tremendous benefit. And I think the textbooks have to go in, and Glenn, I feel strongly about library collections, but that's a quick fix. And if we can't afford it this year, I'm not sure that we, you know, I don't know. I mean, it's something to put out there. That we have to celebrate the fact that we've moved so far ahead in technology, and there has been sort of a trade-off there. We can't wait forever on the library collection, but I think putting the textbooks in first, to me, made some sense. So I think that this is a very lean budget, that we are including measured improvements, that we are maintaining our programs, that we've got our class sizes. And when you look at comps, and I pulled Kevin's charts out again today, with similar districts, that neither in our requested budget increases or our per pupil expenditures or the dollar amount that we're asking for, that we are not out of line. As a matter of fact, we're in the low edge of our DRG, and I never wanna say, let's just catch up with the district, that's not the point.
No, are we the
point is
lowest?
if, I think of the K-12 districts, we are just about the lowest.
Yeah.
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 And I sometimes put Easton, Reading, and whatever the other one's name is, because they're not all K-12.
Mm.
They tend to be either K-8 or 9-12, and so sometimes that's a little unfair. So, so I just think it's a lean budget, so not only, so I don't see room to reduce. So when you look at the additional list, which is very well, it's also lean, I'm going, okay, is there any room left in the current budget that you can kind of make some trade-offs, more
Mhm.
trade-offs? And I always see a couple of like, and I mean nickel and diming things.
Right.
One is the virtual high school. There's a little bit of a trade-off you can make. Now that is being short-sighted, but it could save you a little bit of money. Just take the seats and don't worry about trying to attach yourself to the faculty part.
Right.
Wait till later.
But again, that's something
It's short-term
that,
thinking.
like, you know, like to Laura's point, let's continue to fund what we've started, like last year, that was it. You know, we were so
Okay,
proud
okay,
to bring that
okay.
in. No, but you're
Well,
right, here we
yeah.
are making these very hard choices.
Yeah, so this is the nickel and dime. Here's another
Yeah.
one that's
Yeah.
not quite nickel and diming. But having just said that I appreciate the district's investment in PD, I do, I think it's tremendous. I also think that like others have said, when you look at training and conferences, it's gone from 280 to 424 in a couple of years, $100,000. So I don't think that we should slash it, but could you find some $10,000, $20,000 in there to make it a little bit more level funded? And maybe you could throw in the summer curriculum days and just look at that total and see if it could be leveled out a little bit. Cause it has grown, and I'm just saying the rate of, especially when you think about adding coaches, there's a lot of investment in staff, training and staff development, which is wonderful, but maybe the arc is too high. And maybe just, even it out a little bit, that would just be another possible way of trading off, and I don't love it. And then, and this is terrible, but I asked the question about class sizes at the high school, and can you compare them to the prior years, the average class sizes? And you may be able to find, 0.1 here and there, just because some of the averages look like they're going down.
Right.
And this is probably not the year we try to lower class sizes, which are already look pretty healthy for departmental averages. So again, you can shave, just look and shave just a little bit, maybe. And again, that's just one point of view. I'm not trying to convince anybody necessarily. It's just, if you're looking for any flexibility to kind of absorb some of this list, those are 2 or 3 areas that we could look at. And then, this is the completely, that I shouldn't even say this, the DMC word, but I
Yeah.
will. That there's some money to continue to make those special ed model changes, which I think is crucial. I just wish that we could bargain a little bit with them. As an organization, it seems they charge a lot for their services. That's all, it's
They're
just
expensive.
it's an expensive service, that's all. Not that we don't need that service, I just wonder if we could just go and say, my board said it was too expensive. I can't bring our board down.
I'll try that.
So,
Yeah.
it just seems, like we're buying a brand that's a little bit, maybe that's what the market is, it just seems a little bit high to me, that's all.
Thank
So
you.
we're just nickel and diming, but,
Right.
I'm saying maybe the first step for me would be, is there any flexibility within the budget to make a little bit more room for some of these items? But I certainly, support this, not accept, but it's the timing of the alternative high school that I am troubled by. It is a huge expense. It's a very worthwhile program. It's coming to me late in the game. I would like a lot more discussion about it, rather than put it in the budget and then try to hurry up the rationale. And I think getting the word out for that program and building it up, I'm not sure that we're at the right time to have it affect next year's budget. I can be convinced, but that's where I'm starting from, having not seen the proposal, so I apologize and all of that, but I'm not sure the timing. I just think we need to think about whether that would really work for such a big expense.
Especially because we just started the community steps program this year
And the
and
preschool's
revamping the
been revamped.
preschool and
Yeah, and I understand the need, I truly do. I just
I think we all
think
do,
it's
yeah.
just a sense of timing. I like knowing the programmatic pieces, the big ones before the budget rather than during the budget. I think it puts us all at a disadvantage that way.
Right, okay, thank you. I think we've pretty much heard from everyone.
Except for you.
Well, I mean, my thoughts are that, clearly the 1.0% guidance that we were given by the Board of Finance would do grave harm to our schools. I think there's just an expectation in our community that we are going to continue to produce wonderful schools. And, you know, I've said before, we've somehow been able to do it every year that you've been superintendent. You know, last year everyone was just, so proud and happy that we came in with a 0, and you were very clear, this funds everything we need. The year before, 7.77, oh, you know, we did it that year too, and the year before, and the year before that. This year we can't do it, and it's just a real eye-opener, I think, to many in the community, that it's time to put the brakes on and face reality that we're doing harm to our schools, and we have to invest in them. You know, Debbie makes a very good point. Okay, we can all feel real good about continuing to cut, but then the year will come when we're looking at an 8 or a 10% increase, and we'll be that school that other boards and other DERGAs say, oh, Wilton's up, you know, da 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 da. And clearly we don't want that to happen. I think someone else made the point earlier, they never thought they'd be on a Wilton Board of Education that was debating textbooks and social workers, you know, one against the other. It's just sort of a sign of where we are. We've eliminated, you know, JV sport, basketball and games and ice time for the hockey team and stuff. We're really scraping bone here. Thank you again to the administrators for all the answers to the questions. I know, like, I asked a question about the professional development levels. I think that's numbers just sort of jumped out for a bunch of us. And I know we have, few things we do are as important as investing in our staff, and I think it's wonderful, the commitment we've made with Teachers College. So I just want to look and see what some of the recommendations are. But, you know, as we go into our meetings on February 13th with the Board of Finance, I think everyone can feel good that your board supports the work that you've done and are willing to take that to the Board of Finance and you know, stand up for our schools. But whether or not we're going to ask you to sort of do some tweaking and things remains to be seen. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, I think that's sort of the sense of where we all are, I guess. Is there anything else anyone would like to add?
Yeah, I just want to kind of, you know, talk about, I mean, you know, maybe there are things to tweak in professional development, but investing in our teachers and our staff is directly affecting the classroom. And especially as we go through curriculum and things are changing and we're updating all the time, professional development is important. And I'm guessing that summer curriculum days, I should probably know the answer to this, but as we're going through our curriculum reviews, those generate curriculum days. I mean, a lot of work is getting done in the curriculum reviews and require, you know, just the science standards and the math.
And it
thing
seems
and
that
the-
every year we go to the summer curriculum days, so I'm thinking that we've sort of scraped that one about it.
Well, I mean, you know, right, and it's not like summer, like it's we're not at the beach. I mean, they're working
No.
hard, they're doing
And I
the
think,
work that they need to do, the teachers need to do to go into the classroom and, you know, give our kids the skills they need. I mean, you know, it's not just learning how to spell Connecticut and do long division in second grade anymore. You know, it's, you know, the teachers need, and especially grade school level, I'm sorry, I'm just so impressed with all grade school teachers that they're teaching every subject. they're teaching science and math and ELA and, you know, everything else too, tying shoes and, you know, and just, they need that development and the time to develop the curriculum and have people working with them. And, you know, I think I will go out and, address, you know, the math curriculum is an example of where we rushed into it without the support, without the, you know, and again, I think it was thrown at us at similar, you know, at a bad time in the year or, you know, and I think we're suffering for that. And that we don't want to go through that again. At least I don't, as long as I'm on this board, want to see that happen again, where our kids are struggling because we didn't give the staff the support they needed when we literally threw a new curriculum at them. Okay, I'm gonna be quiet now. But.
No, right, and that costs money to avoid that, things like that from happening. We're still suffering the fallout from a poorly implemented math curriculum. And we have hundreds of kids who are paying the price.
I would agree with my colleagues here about, and I think there's an overall support for these items that were not put into the budget, but perhaps should be reconsidered and to look to see where we might be able to fit them in, or if possibly if it means the budget squeaks up a little bit higher as a result of them, I think all of us would be willing to defend each and every one of these, not only to the Board of Finance, but to the public at
To the
large
town,
as
yeah.
to the reason for them. In that way, though, let me ask about participation fees. I've always been a strong proponent against them, and I still am. I think if we were financially in a situation where we could do away with them, I would do away with them in a heartbeat. But they are here and they've been well established now for a few years. So I guess my question would go out to the principals to say, what do you think the tolerance would be among the school community of any increases to any of these participation fees? How would it affect, if it would affect, participation, whether it be in clubs and or sports, if any of those fees were to increase, either by a little or by a lot? And I also include in that parking fees as well at the high school here. Again, parking fees to me, I mean, I don't know. We provide free transportation to each and every student. So I think to be able to park here at our school, to drive your car in, that should be at a high premium to be able to do that. And if you can't afford it, then hop on the bus. I know that's pretty strong, and maybe a lot of people would be angry at me
I
for
would
that
feel that
statement,
same
but
way.
Well,
That's just-
Darien only let seniors park.
only seniors can park.
At least that's the way it was when we were looking at.
Well, we
Trying
only
to
charge
change
our
those
seniors,
parts,
yeah,
yeah.
we only charge
No,
our
but they,
seniors.
like, only
Juniors
seniors
park
can
free.
park to school.
Juniors park for free, but I guess a senior who doesn't wanna pay can park in the free parking lot down by the tennis courts.
We could also give a real premium to the students who park in the central office parking lot.
Ticketing, we should start ticketing the
$100
kids who are
a day.
illegally parking where they're not supposed to park.
$1,000 for
A
those
$1,000
parking
ticket. Anyway, so those are questions that I have too, is I wonder what would they be willing to bear to still participate? What would they be willing to spend? And then it's a conversation for us to have again. Do we even want to go there? Do we even want to raise
Right.
prices, yes or no?
Well, someone raised the point last week, I think it was Gretchen, you know, she was talking about hockey. Just, you know, you play youth hockey, you're used to paying for it. Like, I remember with my own kids, we played travel soccer, and I was used to writing the big checks for soccer. And all of a sudden we got here, and I was like, woohoo,
Yeah.
you know, it's.
Free.
it's
Which, I mean,
free.
but at the same time, I guess, I later was rethinking that, thinking, well, there are people who never got to play hockey, and now
Prior
they
to
can
high
come here and
school.
play hockey.
And
So
if,
it's-
and I recall, that was one of the questions, some of the information I had asked for from Chris, is to provide us a breakdown of the sports, what gets paid by the district, what gets paid by the parents, what gets paid by the boosters. And
Yeah.
the response I saw is that he's working on that, because it
Right.
means getting in touch with some of the booster clubs to get all that information.
Right,
so.
but you know, when you get back to the participation fees, I mean, yeah, as a board, we really struggled with that.
Yeah.
But then when you do put it in the context of, you know, up until you got to high school, you are used to paying 100% of those fees yourself. So it does make it a little bit more palatable. I'm not saying that I want us to do that.
And there would still always be the opportunity for the person who cannot afford to pay those fees,
Right,
there's opportunity for them to have that covered for them.
yes.
And I think as long as that's out there as well, I think that's really important.
Right, but I know that there is pressure on parents. I was given a list last week of all the fees, someone, gave me a cumulative list of everything ranging from, tuxedos and formal wear for the band to the adjudication trip, it adds up, it does add up, and we are
Absolutely.
sensitive to that. There's a lot of families who don't have the extra money that they're willing to pay in a participation
Well, that's
fee.
why it would be good to hear from the principals, to hear those stories and how would that affect.
Just reel it off, Jen.
Please, yeah, if you
Your
have
initial
thoughts,
thought, go right
I'd
ahead.
love to hear them, yeah. I'm sure you have people banging down your door, I wish they would raise our participation fees, is that what you're gonna tell us?
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that we do is try to provide some enrichment opportunities, and the higher the cost goes, the less access families will have. I do think it's interesting that we probably have some families that for $25 get a lot of bang for their buck because they do multiple things, where some families, 25 doing one activity, that's a lot, right? So I think those are the people it's gonna impact the most, because if they have other engagements, outside what the school provides and that they pay for, and then they're only doing one thing, we're gonna not have those people participating, because if we raise it to $50 for something that meets, not that long, that's a lot of money for a club at the elementary school. So I think we just have to be careful, and I think it has to do with the way we collect the participation fees once, no matter how much you participate. Does that make sense? So maybe that's something that we can look at.
Or even if, right, because right now the money just goes into a general fund. I mean, I think I envisioned when we imposed activity fees that, like, Cider Mill would get the money to develop its extra, its co-curriculars.
Right.
And the same thing with the high school. It's a similar thing. If a child does one club and pays $50, but it's not something that costs,
So,
I feel as if, I think it's a broad question, what's the tolerance threshold on participation fees? I feel as if, since we've instituted it, I haven't received a lot of chatter from the parent community about it. I think people have accepted it, this is what we pay, and this is where we are. I think certainly if there's any movement or action to increase it, we'd all hear more about it, right? And looking at these different models, they're all different, what Chris provided from the
What
other
page,
schools.
what page are you talking?
I'm on question 78 here.
All right, thank you.
And, you can see that, well, I won't go into details and mention specific. You can see that some schools have
Right.
walked away from them, so to speak. Some have a tiered model where different sports are paying more. I recall when we instituted the participation fees, we had the conversation at the board table about ice hockey. And I thought it was a thoughtful deliberation, conversation. I think we had some passionate representation from the ice hockey community that said we just really don't think that we should be in a position where we're saying this is more important and consequently more expensive than this. And I don't want to. I think to create an environment where you have sports pitted against each other, just philosophically where it costs more. And I recognize fully that the ice rink fees, they're very, very high, which I think is why Chris took a look at the boys ice hockey fees and cut them back a little bit. So it's hard for me to say, because honestly I haven't heard that much about it. I have heard some parents grudgingly saying we're paying it while we're paying our taxes, and that's a bit troublesome for them. I've heard the argument that Ms. Finkelstein is referencing, where I have sometimes families saying, you know what, this all adds up. We're trying to do so much for our students, and we're paying for parking you brought up, we're paying for parking, the adjudication trip. My son or daughter wants to play 3 sports. We seem to be somewhere perhaps in that sweet spot of what we're charging right now. So it's hard for me to answer the question. Weighing in on it personally, I would not be a proponent of raising participation fees. I think it's part of an education I've been opposed to it philosophically all along, however, we've supported and said we'll work on collecting the fees, and certainly in the realm of athletics, our families have been responsive. They recognize they must pay before the student essentially goes on the field with a little bit of latitude in the timeline. And then the one-time fee for clubs and activities, you could argue, somebody could argue, I think that that's a bargain if a student's doing 6 clubs, and sometimes they do, so our students tend to do so much, for the $50 flat fee, that seems reasonable. But I would not be a proponent of raising it, and exactly where the money goes, we're not in a position to say if we raise it, then Wilton High School will accrue this much money to invest in this, or this program, so that's always been a little bit ambiguous. Some thoughts?
Okay. Anything else? Anyone else want to weigh in?
Yeah, Kevin, someone sent out even a couple of weeks ago, showing what the current proposals or requests are by district, and it's not in your, I looked at your presentation, and it was decided that we couldn't read it because it was so small when it came out in the email.
Right,
that
you know,
came.
I included that in the community presentation, it's like the last slide.
Okay, I don't have the community presentation though. Okay, the one you
I
last
think
did.
that hasn't been posted yet, I think that was
Yeah.
a casualty of my absence this week.
Well, if we do everything on the back page, with the exception at this point of the high school, the half, it's a 0.4% increase. If we take the social worker, the ELL, sped secretary, the textbooks, library, whatever it is, it's 0.4, so it gets us to a 2.38, budget. I have to think that somewhere in here, if you sharpen the pencil and go back again, we can find a chunk of money. And I agree with Deborah. I think as I look at the professional development budget and some of the other conference budgets, meetings budgets and stuff, there's got to be some budge in there that we can say that we can get that down even from the 0.4 increase, maybe 0.2, huh?
Well, I mean, we've been looking, and this group met a week ago Friday. We
Yeah.
went through this, and I think you heard some of the conversation about prioritizing and choice-making, and,
Yeah.
that's something that's been a conscious commitment to support our staff, but I think we've heard this now from at least 3 of you, so we'll go back and look again.
Yeah, and I think we can. I mean, look, we've invested heavily over the past few years in professional development. I mean, we really have. We've given everything that has been asked, everything that you've requested. Maybe we can just.
But again, I know there's some thoughtful analysis in here that
Yeah.
I know I haven't had a chance to look at yet. So I know it's not in here unless it's,
Oh, I don't doubt it. Oh, listen,
I know.
I am not
I just don't know if that's
criticizing
the place that
at
we
all.
wanna,
Well, I don't know what else. Those are big numbers.
Yeah.
You've got to look for big numbers to have an impact, to find room.
Well,
And
and I was just talking about on a scale of a few $1,000s, because there's a big initiative in here, it seems like around special ed staff development, I'm
Yeah.
calling it the wrong
Right.
thing, but it's there.
no, it is. That's right. Yeah.
Responsive classroom, continuing with teachers' college, none of which do we wanna back away from.
No.
It just seems the increase over the last couple of years has been a little steep, and I'm just wondering, just to find a few thousand to dial it back, not to kill anything or to not invest in the teachers or any of that.
Right.
Well, but we're only talking about a few $1,000s. We're talking about we're talking $300,000 of those increases there. That gives it that 0.4%. It's $300,000. If we find 100 of it somewhere,
Right,
okay, that brings it
Right.
down a point,
right.
okay?
Yeah,
So-
no,
Right.
we're talking in
Yeah.
increments, not
Yeah.
slashes.
Right, exactly.
So it sounds to me that there's some consensus among this board in support of those items, perhaps with the exception of the alternative high school,
Right, which
because
we
we
just
haven't
don't
even
know
seen the
enough about
proposal
We
yet.
for
just don't
that
know,
as
I don't
yet.
know enough about
We
that.
don't even know
Right.
enough about it yet.
Yeah.
But the other 4 items, I mean, is that a correct statement,
Yeah,
that there's
well, it is.
consensus?
I'm all for it.
I think
I think there are probably a
Along the
few
lines
more
of
that I could
what you
add back if I really was.
I'm sorry?
There are maybe a few more
Well,
things
it
that we could
it
add.
doesn't get at your
I think we're
library
asking-
collection.
I know it doesn't
You
get,
could
I know, that's.
ask the
That's
Well,
administrators
I-
that you will maybe come back.
20-year-old.
we have consensus on this.
See what you think.
even though we're
Got it.
going.
And share that with
even though
us.
we're going-
No,
still.
I know, I hear what
Okay.
you're saying, I'm just trying to make it clear. I'm sorry.
So I said to Kevin, I think what we're asking is if he and his team could check and, go back with their pencils and see what they come up with and report back to us on that.
Well, we know that this pencil has been very sharp over
I
the last
know.
3 years.
Pencils are broken.
Okay.
He's got a
Pencils aren't in the
fabulous
budget.
eraser.
Right, maybe it got a little dull
We don't
this
have
year.
more pencils.
It
More pencils here
got a
than
little
little
dull
nibs.
this year, maybe,
Just
okay?
kidding.
They're
So,
drawing in the dirt, because the
Yeah.
pencils, we can't afford new pencils.
Can't afford
No
it.
pencils.
So if we would appreciate if you could come back to us with any recommendations on that.
And show us what the budget would look like with adding these things into the budget.
Yeah,
Because, like, I'm looking at it from a timing
Yeah.
perspective, our next time we're together is we're
Is
with the Board of,
after the Board of Finance.
so,
Sure.
Aren't we voting next time?
The
The
next
next
time, the
time-
22nd.
but we talk to the Finance Board before we vote in
Yeah.
support of it or not.
We meet with the finance board, but we won't, next time we meet
Right.
is with the board of
but
finance.
for our purposes, I think this
Yeah,
board
that's
would like to see what the budget looks like with these things added back in. And
Mhm.
after you've taken into account some of the feedback we've given you tonight about
Before the board of finance meeting.
opportunities
Okay.
And to email that
shave.
to all of us, right?
Yeah,
So that we could review it. And then what would we show to the Board of Finance? Which version, or would we show them
That.
both versions,
That.
I guess?
I think our second version, I think
Uh,
we're asking for a change.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have to vote on that change?
Well, I can tell you right
No,
now,
it's
the
not-
point-
because
still
it's-
belongs
it's
to
still
Kevin.
his, right,
It's
okay,
it's
yes.
2.38. If we had, with these add backs, with the exception of the virtual high school, gets us to 2.38, okay?
Wow.
So we're asking, what can you do to get it down a little bit lower? Okay,
Yeah.
It's 0.4
Yeah.
above the 1.98. And I think the 2.38 still gets us the lowest in the dirt, still, by a significant margin in
I
some
think
cases.
Darien, if my research, first of all, it's hard to find Darien on the web.
Yeah.
Where'd it go?
I was looking for that too.
But, finally I found it, by going to the high school and then into the back door, but anyway.
Ah.
I think their proposal is 275,
Okay.
275.
So we'd still.
And is that the board's, or is that just
That's the
the
superintendent.
superintendent's?
And Weston actually might be very low this year,
Weston's
I think
had
he's
some
in
high
the-
ones,
His is,
haven't they, the last
his is
couple of years?
high
Is
because,
it
higher
Weston?
than previous years because
Okay.
they have, similar to Ridgefield and some of the other communities around special education, they've experienced some overage that they weren't prepared for. So, part of the majority of that proposal was to address, special education overages.
And then don't quote me on Darien, I just, trying to,
Through the back door.
through the back, well,
She's
just-
sneaking
I don't
around
have-
to
I don't
get
have
you.
it prominently displayed and it wasn't covered in the press, so I just found a document that looked like it was the proposal, but it could have been last year. So I take it back, sorry, Darien.
Okay.
watch our
You're now the
podcast.
source.
Well, thank you to all for a good discussion, a very productive discussion. Our next, as discussed, our next meeting will be a joint Board of Education, Board of Finance meeting on
Where is that going
Tuesday,
to be?
February 13th here.
Here, okay.
But it's at 7:30 at night, not 7 o'clock, 7:30.
All right.
And at this point, we would like to welcome our member of the public to come forward, if there's anybody with a comment. Seeing no one, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can we get the January
24?
Do you have that?
It's in your budget packet.
24. I know, but school
You can have
clocks
mine.
are
There's no
always
packet.
behind.
There's no
You can
packet.
That's a lie.
There was
School
no,
clocks are always a minute behind. iPhone watches,
it was just the,
clocks,
huh? Yeah.
I was, all right.
my minutes.
Sorry about that.
I thought you had.
No, I didn't think you like Kevin Ray.
Maybe, I missed it.
Whatever happens.
At 4,
Whatever.
4:25. So you're welcome to join me. Yeah, I'll text him right now.
Oh, yeah, I'll give this to you in a second.
I stole my pen and paper and then
Not
I
supposed to
left
steal
it
your
at home.
What's your turn? Well, that cost us 10 cents.
Yeah, I don't remember
Oh, wait,
seeing it.
no, I
I don't
can
think,
go
I don't
here.
think we
It's
did.
not in my book.
Yeah, but I don't think we ever got that distributed. Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see comments they made.
Pay that card.
You know, anything that gets me a little
I don't
bit,
know.
but.
What was it? You might see, I
This pile just keeps getting bigger.
I know, exactly.
Today I came in.
And I had to pull out my junior league bag to keep all my.
No, not the leaders. I have, a newspaper and I'm so appreciative, didn't even know. Where I wanna go.
Oh, because you're going to.
I know, you know,
Where?
Playa del Rey.
I have stuff to share with you.
30 minutes of that. You know where it's
Playa del
over?
Carmen?
Yeah.
Is that a,
I decided not to say anything.
is that like a palace of these?
We're going to the Fairmont.
I don't know.
I have to go with that. How are you? How are you?
I can.
Sunscreen. It's packed.
But
Good for you.
You know me.
I'm gonna be gone for Florida.
And your TV, it's the yellow
So,
polka dot library.
Yeah.
We've got the body for it.
I insure it. Yeah.
I know, yes, she could wear the bikini.
Oh, she absolutely could.
Look
Yeah.
you have
Mac, MAC.
You know, if
Look
you
how
do it-
fast she's moving right now. That's the fastest I've seen her move in a long time. Talk about bikinis, and she's out the door.
Try to get coffee or something.
I know the whole town's listening to Chris and her bikini.
Oh, the sun wasn't turned off yet.
Young kid, when you're young,
I do have to say,
you don't want to
woman
discourage
who's been
them.
taking my circuit class with me for a while.
Well, even here, the high school collection's great. Like, Nora checks out books all the time from here. She's like, there's no way, like, that's the library. They're on hold for weeks. So she's like, here, no one checks books. So she feels very
Reflect
clever.
while you're in Florida, you wanna have an escape.
No, it is.
I won't, I'll be